Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today, at the request of Navark Rella, I'm going to be taking a closer look at the Earth Cargo Service. Now, you might say, what's the point of that? Why do we care about the Earth Cargo Service? Well, because it's just as important, if not in fact more important, to the story of early human space travel than Starfleet. We've looked at Starfleet, we've looked at the evolution of Starfleet and other military organizations. That's all very well and good. In terms of day-to-day, humans going about the stars, you're far more likely to encounter ships of the Earth Cargo Service or Earth Passenger Service than you are to ships of Starfleet. So it's really worth looking into because it gives us a real idea of what life was like in this period. We talk a lot about warfare and, key historical events in the form of various wars, and to an extent it's right that we do, because it's a very good way of conceiving history, because wars demarcate periods of change. Before a war and after a war can be very different, and the impact that war then has going forward on how people live and any kind of future events, it's right that you should look at that. But equally, social history is very important, because it tells us how people live then as they do now, and to an extent there's often very little change. You could argue that social history is often material, so we often talk about how difficult life was back in, say, the early 20th century or the 19th century, because they didn't have technology. Of course, life wasn't difficult for them, life was just life. But that kind of change is also important, because changes, in terms of automation and stuff like that, that has affected how people live and how people approach the world and how people approach larger things. And, it all has a knock-on effect. There is a grassroots impact that can be created by technological change. If we want to know how people in the 23rd century and the 24th century live and how people's lifestyles have evolved, we need to, take that look at the 22nd century, and the best place to look is the Earth Cargo Service and the Earth Passenger Service, because basically it ties into cultural and economic development. What is economic development? Well, economic development is what goes on every day. People often tie economies into, money. It's the flow of money. Well, it's not really the flow of money. That's kind of the byproduct of what's actually going on, which is human activity. Economy is made up of human activity. And, in terms of history, that's like the gold standard. That's what we want to know. We want to know what people are getting up to, because it helps us understand the past and how people lived and how people saw the world. So, with that rant over, we can now get on to the specifics of the Earth Cargo Service. So, we're going to start out with, let's start at the beginning. Okay, so with regards to the Earth Cargo Service, obviously there was various kind of civilian expeditions that went out prior to the invention of warp drive, but it's not really anything worth talking about. It's not a large-scale activity. Now, with the invention of warp drive, boom, it becomes a very consistent activity, and then all of a sudden, there's all these things that we need to be keeping track of. Because one of the problems you have is that you look at with any kind of new technology, automobiles and planes is perhaps the best example of this. Because with automobiles and planes, automobiles come out just before World War One. And okay, they're not common in the civilian market, they are, and same thing with aeroplanes. They're basically the playthings of the rich. They're not really the most reliable thing. If you're rich and you want to show off and you want to have a bit of fun, you'll buy a car, but they're not generally widely used necessarily. The early adopter was the civilian market, not the military market, because you just had people in the civilian market who had money to burn on this kind of stuff. Similar thing with cars. Again, so, you have rich, you have the rich aristocrats in the First World War, or, officers who have enough money to buy a car, a nice Rolls Royce, And then during World War One, they start slapping some armored plates on it, and in sort of 1914, and like, right, let's go out and see if we can find some Germans to shoot at. And in that, it's like, that's something that's being pulled from the civilian world into the military sector and has been retrofitted for military needs. And then the military goes, oh, this is quite good. Oh, can we get... Yeah, let's have more of that. So with automobiles particularly, it's a case of the civilian sector very much often leads the military sector, at least in those very early stages. And then, equally, there's a lot of kind of deviation. So what the military needs from its motor vehicles is very different from what the civilian world needs for its motor vehicles. So you see a lot of difference, for example, today in, the average civilian car and the average military vehicle, because they're intended to do very different things, even though they are ostensibly both, four-wheeled vehicles. With that established, that the civilian market can outflank the military market, let's talk about the Bison class. You see, the Bison class was developed probably about the 2080s. It's a Warp 1 ship. Basically, the idea behind the Bison was to take Zefram Cochrane's warp drive and apply it on the biggest scale possible to create just a gigantic freighter / cargo ship / transport ship / whatever the customer needs, basically. The Bison is a very, very early warp ship that can be used for pretty much anything. So there were military versions, mostly used as transports and supply carriers, but in the grand scheme of things, they had basically no differences with the civilian versions that did cargo running and passenger transport. The Bison was used primarily for passenger transit within the system. In terms of the Bison was capable of reaching Alpha Centauri at Warp 1, which means that is a 4-year run to Alpha Centauri. If you want to maintain an active population during that time, you're looking at about a capacity of 1,000 people, with the understanding that it's a 4-year journey and you're probably going to finish up the journey with more people than you started. You're going to colonize Alpha Centauri or a similar kind of system. Extra people don't hurt. But if we're running it as a purely sleeper vessel, then you can fill that with up to 3,000 people in suspended animation. It's also used more commonly for within-system transit, which generally runs from Luna out to Mars and the outer planets, and again, various colonies, the various Jovian moons. Warp 1 is a good speed for in-system transit. You can avoid crashing into large celestial bodies at Warp 1. And it makes life a lot easier, rather than doing a 6-month hop to Mars or whatever. Now, another thing to bear in mind, actually, is that impulse drive comes quite a long time after warp drive. Not until some point in the 22nd century, maybe the 2220s. We see a lot of prototype warp ships which actually have a conventional thruster cone or fusion cone. Depends what you say that engine is, but very conventional thrust-based engines. And that means that realistically, well, especially by the 24th century, most in-system transits are done at impulse power because impulse engines have developed to such an extent. In this very early period of human space travel, there isn't even impulse engines. So you're very, very reliant on your warp engines to do just about anything. Now, the problem with the Bison is that, well, it's trying to be everything. I mean, it's great, it's huge, it's a great cargo ship. You can use it for all sorts of things. You can haul whole asteroids, small asteroids, inside it. You can transport vast amounts of cargo. You can transport lots of people on board these ships. But there's a problem, and that problem is the Kenziti. Yes, you remember them. The furries return. So I mentioned in the Mako's video the problem of Kenziti piracy, and that does tie very much into the story of the Earth Cargo Service, or indeed why it was necessary. Because you have all these ships going out, little do we realise we're sitting in the middle of the territory of a Kenziti clan. The problem is with a lot of these ships is that they are very, very large, they have very valuable cargoes, and they have no real means of getting away, nor do they have any means of protecting themselves. So they're just ideal prey. So basically, you've got the Kinziti find a sleeper ship that's traveling at, warp 1, and they go, oh, that's going to this planet. Oh, well, if we just sneak on board and alter its coordinates, we can send it over here, and when those colonists wake up, we can sell them off to Orion slavers. Brilliant! And also, the cargo ships with active crews couldn't outrun the pirates. So what is quickly realised in terms of future development of these kind of transport ships, you need to recognise that actually the most valuable part of the ship is generally the people and the engine. The cargo you're transporting, that's probably replaceable because you're transporting bulk cargo. Yes, missing a shipment is going to be difficult, but your ship can run dozens and dozens and dozens of shipments in its lifespan. And so you can make up for any individual losses if you can get away from a bad situation and live to haul another day. So we have all these security concerns for one, piracy and all of that. We also have the concerns of organising the logistics, so you have all these human colonies that are sprouting up about a parsec out from Earth. These need management. You need to manage who's sending cargo which way. Basically often what these Bison class ships are doing is they're going to the planet carrying colonists, and they return with some kind of cargo, generally some kind of resources, that then goes into building more starships. You need to manage that. You need to manage that traffic and make sure that everyone knows where everyone is, particularly as you're needing the military to protect you, even though that's not actually Starfleet at this point. You're generally filing that with the United Nations and then whoever picks that up. There's an awful lot of registration and accounting that needs to be done for all these cargo ships that are going out, for all these ships that are going out and engaging in economic activity. And so that's really what leads to the foundation of the Earth Cargo Service, and that's probably about 2080, 2090. It's pretty soon after you get large-scale human space travel, because the need becomes very apparent, and also the need for management of procurement. When Zephram Cochrane and Dr. Masao Ukazaki developed the Bison class, they're kind of just going for a one-size-fits-all solution, and they themselves have no experience of running passenger liners or freighters. They're not the best people to really design these things going forward. So we start to see proper dedicated freighters appearing around about 2200, and those are mostly rated at Warp 1. We'll see Warp 1 Plus appearing around about the 2220s. So let's talk about, the two canon freighters from this period. We have the Y class and the J class. Let's start with the Y class, the bigger one. This is a large, heavy hauler. It's probably longer range. It's got 8 cargo pods. So in the case of the Y class, the individual pods are detachable rather than the entire boom. You've got very heavy impulse nacelles up at the front. Those are impulse nacelles. The warp nacelles are actually located further back, and that actually gives it a very forward-leaning warp geometry, which is quite interesting for a cargo ship, because we see with the J class, which is smaller, probably medium-range hauler, that has a detachable boom. So the drive section will actually detach from the entire boom and can fly off independently, and it's extremely agile when it does that, because you've got it's got a very, very powerful engine and no weight to haul, so it can be very, very swift. But the main premise behind these things, this is almost what we would call lizard tactics. So when a lizard is attacked by a bird, it might shed its tail to give the bird something to chew on while it makes its escape. And in a similar way, it would not be unusual for these cargo ships. Obviously, it's not ideal, but you'd far rather keep the cargo ship and lose some of your cargo than lose the entire lot and have to replace an entire cargo ship, its freight, and its crew. That's very difficult to do, as compared to just making up your quota of cargo elsewhere, and also you probably account for a little bit of piracy. So you run at a surplus a little bit, because chances are it's not all going to make it. but you can detach those individual sections and leave those for the pirates, and you can get away scot-free. You keep your very expensive warp reactor and your very non-expendable crew and live to haul another day. Capping out the cannon ships that we have here, we have the Sarajevo class. This is a weird ship. It appears a lot in the background of Enterprise, but it's not really clear what exactly it is. It very much looks like a passenger liner, and yes, passenger liners are part of the Earth Cargo Service, or more specifically, the Earth Transport Service, or the Earth Passenger Service. It probably all falls under the umbrella of Earth Cargo Service. People are one of the most valuable cargoes. It's very important that ferries and liners all register. In the case of the Sarajevo, what we're looking at here is a dedicated civilian transport. It looks more like something that is emphasizing comfort and longevity rather than something that is hauling large numbers of passengers on short trips. This is probably taking a smaller number of passengers, at least relatively speaking, on longer trips. You're probably looking at something in the region of about 1,000 passengers easily. I mean, look at modern cruise ships. This thing is 200 meters long, not far off the size of most modern cruise ships, and modern cruise ships can easily accommodate over 2,000 people, so it's not unreasonable to think that you're looking at a minimum 1,000 people on board these Sarajevo class ships. These are rated for Warp 2, so they're a little bit faster. They're not stupidly fast. They're certainly not going as fast as the military vessels of the day, but they are pretty quick, and you know, because having some speed available to you, A, people are far less patient than cargo, and B, you also want to get them out of danger if you do encounter anything. People tend to have their own opinions about how long they should have to spend on your ship, even if it is a very, very nice and very well furnished Sarajevo class. Okay, so I'm going to veer now into the areas of beta canon with some post-NX ships. So these are ships that are launching as the NXs come out, or soon after, and they're incorporating generally better technology. They're also taking a lot of benefits from the Romulan War as well when we get to that. So the first one to talk about is the L class. This is big, like really big. This is an ultra heavy hauler. It is designed to transport large scale machinery. This is, you know, this is hauling actual industrial assets around places. So that's pretty important. I mean, in terms of, you know, making comparisons to other franchises, this is like the Nostromo from Alien, which is hauling a whole ore refinery behind it. That's kind of what you're looking at here. It's rated for Warp 2.5, so it's a little bit faster because it was developed really during the Romulan War for the various logistical requirements that came up during that conflict, the various that needed addressing, because you had a lot of manufacturing capacity that needed to be built up very quickly. And it can also carry starship components, so again, large pieces of equipment, large pieces of machinery, starship parts. They are not small, and you need something on the size of the L class to transport. Next here we have the Brunel class transport. Now this is a very interesting one. This is a passenger transport, or would be a passenger transport. It was used just as a general purpose utility carrier. In the Romulan War, it actually came out a little bit later. It was rated at Warp 3, and its main use is that it's basically a colony ship. This thing has 3 very, very large shuttle bays. So in terms of getting your colonists to a planet and getting them down, and then off you go to, you know, pick up another load of colonists and deliver them somewhere and take them down to a planet and get them started, the Brunel was ideal and really would start off that process that would then be later taken over by the Harcourt class, which is very big but very different. In a nutshell, the Brunel is a civilian transport, and it's good for, you know, a little bit of freight, not heavy freight, light freight, and passenger transport. The main thing it has is it's got those shuttle bays that mean you have pretty quick turnover of passengers, and you're looking at something in the region of 2,000 passengers on this. Last one here, we have the Minuteman class. Now this is very unusual because this is an armed transport. It has 4 torpedo tubes, 3 lasers, and 2 phase cannons. This is really an attempt to merge NX and Daedalus tech. They kind of come from different tech trees. This is technically a Starfleet vessel, and that it basically existed during the war because, you had Starfleet battle groups out in deep space. During resupply runs, when they were restocking on fuel and supplies and ammunition, the Romulans loved to launch surprise attacks, because not only were the battle group's defenses weaker, there was also very tasty cargo ships and supply ships that were very valuable targets that you could take out. So it was a very good opportunity for the Romulans, and having these unarmed transports and freighters was a bit of a liability. So the Minuteman class kind of attempted to correct this by offering something that was not super well armed. It's not a warship and it's not intended to fight on its own, but it can defend itself. And certainly the Romulans did not try it on. If there was a Minuteman class there, they realized it would be pointless. They would have most of their missiles shot down before they even got anywhere near the enemy battle group, so it seemed to serve its purpose, but it wasn't that present throughout the war. It saw a lot of production post-war because it was snatched up by the Earth Cargo Service. Now this brings me to the topic of how the Earth Cargo Service and how human development was, further kind of affected by the Romulan War. Because during the Romulan War, the Earth Cargo Service, their services are in very, very high demand, surprisingly enough, because waging a war is very expensive, especially in material cost. And so the truck drivers, okay, it's dangerous, but they're never going to be short on work. And so with that in mind, the Earth Cargo Service is making lots and lots of money during the Romulan War because it's able to expand its business. At the same time, they've also acquired a lot of capital during the war. Remember, poverty has been eradicated on Earth, yes, money has not, and capital is still very useful in terms of getting things done. And the Earth Cargo Service has amassed quite a bit of capital. And what that then means is that post-war, you obviously then end up with a lot of these older generation Earth ships that are getting outmoded by these new United Federation Starfleet ships, the Rockwell and the Harcourt, that are coming out. And so a lot of stuff, like the Daedalus, like the Minuteman, those are being retired pretty quickly, and the Earth Cargo Service has the available capital to just snatch those up. So, post the Romulan War, the Earth Cargo Service continues to swell in size and expand its operations. And then with the formation of the United Federation of Planets, its opportunities extend even further than before. And so it's able to reach out and conduct much more seamless trade with the other nations of the Federation. It's also able to work together and coordinate with them in further expansion, in the charting of new trade routes, in the transport of goods. You'll see a lot more sort of merchant explorers as well. Stuff like the Minuteman, because it was a relatively quick ship and, capable on its own. That was a very popular choice for a route prover. So you'd take that out and fly around and see, who wants to buy wares, who's interested in what can you buy? We can buy this here, we can sell that to them, we can buy that from them and sell it to these guys, and around we go. And so the wheels of change and the wheels of prosperity turn. And so finally, to conclude, so an interesting thing about the Earth Cargo Service is I have reason to believe that it outlasted the Earth Starfleet, because as far as I can tell, it lasts into original series. Yes, automation is something to bear in mind there, so somebody's going to say, what about those automated freighters during original series? And you're quite right. That's stuff that is going to be consistently needed and can be very easily automated. It's like, the shipyards at Alpha Centauri need 1,000 tons of dilithium ore. Right, okay, well let's just send some cargo ships. You don't need security because you're within Federation borders. Your security is assured. So that leaves the people of the Earth Cargo Service free to go out and find more trade opportunities and find new potential resources. Starfleet and the whole merging of Starfleet into the Federation Starfleet. There's a much more pressing need for militaries to merge than there are for civilian endeavors. And given that, these are still kind of engaging in the individual interests of the various nations of the Federation. So you've got an Andorian cargo service, you've got a Tellarite cargo service, they're all going to have similar things, and these organizations can cooperate and maybe compete a little bit, but also kind of talk with each other and coordinate. And you still have that central authority of the United Federation government and the Starfleet, that is kind of, you're operating under that umbrella, which enables seamless operations. You don't yourselves need to merge into a Federation cargo service. So it's not clear when the Earth cargo service ends, but I don't think it's till the late 23rd century, sort of movie era, is when they start to disappear. And it's also partially because of how technology changes, because technology, as we see going into the 24th century, will evolve to the point where anyone can get a starship. Any civilian can buy a starship with a little bit of, credits, or if they go on a waiting list, or they do, good civic service. I don't know how it works in the 24th century Federation, but you no longer need the large amounts of capital to acquire and run cargo ships, and because automation is also a thing, there's less of a need. Again, replicators have kind of outstripped automation, so you don't even need an Earth cargo service to manage the automated transport ships, because a lot of them have become outmoded by replicators that come in during the 24th century. And so that's how you get to people like Cassidy Yates, who again are kind of doing very much what the Earth cargo service started doing in the late 22nd century, just under their own flag, independent of the Federation authorities. And so in that way, again, this kind of, structure, this way of life, it lasted a long time, but even then, technological development changed it irrevocably and eventually brought the end of the Earth cargo service and a new way of conducting trade and commerce across the stars. So, that's my rant on the Earth cargo service. This is a very long video, but yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on the Earth cargo service. Put those down in the comments below. When do you think it ended? Are there more things you'd like me to talk about with the Earth cargo service? Specific ships, logistics, how that would operate, the interaction between various cargo services. It's a very interesting area of history that isn't often talked about, because we're all naturally drawn to the big impressive starships, but the setting of Star Trek feels so much richer when you have all these things going on in the background, and you have the toing and froing of everyday life. And that's really what's quite interesting, is how do the everyday people of this time live. And with this little look into the Earth cargo service, hopefully we have a bit of a better idea. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.